this surge in increases in cases from a position of strength. But again, we're in the middle of this, and my guess is we're not going to be out of the woods for a while.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we have to take all the precautions and mask up, as we're always saying. You also have released a plan for vaccine. I'd like to know, is it going to be cost effective or perhaps free for certain individuals? And when are you expecting it in the state of New Jersey?
So right now, I would say, what else do we need? Both battling the pandemic as well as our economic recovery, as well as the proper distribution of vaccines. We need more federal help. And I should say that up front. We need direct help to states and counties, to our state and counties, and not just New Jersey, but around the country. We need our federal partners to continue to be there for us as it relates to battling the pandemic. And we need resources as it relates to the vaccine. I think the estimate that we're currently looking at is over $8 billion to properly distribute this vaccine. So we need our federal partners and federal help. In terms of when, Aditi, the good news is there feels like there's a lot of momentum around both development of therapeutics as well as development of vaccines, and that's all good. And my guess is that we may see some results based on, I'm not a medical expert, but we speak to them all the time, sometime maybe as early as the end of this year. But if you're a resident of New Jersey watching this, I think it'll be well into next year, and I hope it's sooner than this. Believe me, we're doing everything we can, assuming it's safe and it works. I think it's well into next year before you could say with conviction that you've got a vaccine that's not just safe, that works, but you've got it in scale and you're distributing it to the broad population.
Definitely. What kind of healthcare policies or changes should we expect, especially when the vaccine comes around?
Well, I think one thing, again, I'll go back to our friend Dr. Fauci, who's been very good to us here in New Jersey, both publicly and privately. I think one thing we should prepare ourselves for is that a lot of the habits that we've developed are probably still going to be important for us. So even with a vaccine, it's not a magic wand. We're going to have to be careful as it relates to social distancing and face coverings if you can't social distance, and washing hands with soap and water, the basic stuff that's all we've got right now. I think some of that stuff is going to be with us. My guess is we'll have more interviews like the one we're doing.
Yes,
we'll do more things virtually. We'll see a lot more work from home if folks can do their jobs from home. I think our habits, they won't change completely. To some extent, we'll go back to where we were, but to other extents, we won't.
Right before I ask you a question on elections, I have to ask you this. As a governor, will you follow the science when it comes to COVID-19? Absolutely.
Definitely. We have every step of the way, and we will continue to. I just got out of a meeting with my senior advisors on this very point. What are we seeing? Where are the hot spots? The good news is we can deal with a community that's going through a hot spot, and we've proven that. I'll give you an example. In Lakewood, one of the fastest growing communities in our state, we had a big flare up a number of weeks ago. We worked with the community. We worked with faith leaders. We surged communications, compliance and enforcement, testing, contact tracing, and it worked. And so that's a playbook that, based on science, based on the data and the facts, that we'll try to deploy to other communities that turn into hotspots.
Definitely, and I truly appreciate the work that you and your team are doing. I have to ask you about the elections. New Jersey as a state has done something totally different in comparison to several states across the nation. Everything is being done by ballots that were mailed to all the New Jersey residents that were eligible to vote and registered. Could you please go through how you're maintaining the security of these ballots, especially in the drop boxes? They have been messed up with in different states. How are you ensuring and protecting the voice of everybody in this election?
Great question. And by the way, so far, this is with a week still to go to the actual election date, an overwhelming success. We've already gotten, I think, something like 2.7 million ballots have been received by our county clerks, and there were only 3.9 million ballots in the entire election in 2016. So that's so far, that's a really good, impressive number, frankly, exceeding any of our highest expectations. So everybody got a ballot, assuming you were registered. And you have sort of 5 different choices here. One is to put it in the post office, and you can track your ballot not through the Postal Service, but you can track it that it was received by your county clerk, and you go online to do that. Secondly, if you don't want to mail it, you could drop it in one of these secure boxes. And by the way, they're all in strategic locations with camera surveillance, and there are almost 300 of them around the state. 5 out of our 6 members are eligible to vote. We all dropped them in a box together
Right.
a couple of weeks ago. The next choice you have is to deliver it to your county clerk, or on election day, you could deliver it to a poll worker. If you don't like any of those 4 choices, you can actually show up and vote in person. We've asked each county to have at least 50% voting capacity on November 3rd, each municipality to have at least 1 location. And we think that hybrid model balances both Aditi public health on the one hand,
Right.
and the sacred right to vote, which is at the core of democracy, on the other.
Exactly. Lastly, I have to ask you this. There is a fear of a backlash after the election day. With the racial unrest that we've already seen in the nation, it's quite concerning. Are you prepared for a backlash or some kind of a negative impact of the elections on the state? And what are you doing in order to protect all the residents?
Yeah, I mean, we are, I would say, prepared. We hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But I have to say I'm an optimist. Regardless of who wins the election on Tuesday, and I know there's a lot of noise about what will happen and all of that. I think if President Trump wins, he'll have an extension, another term of his presidency. If Vice President Biden wins, I believe with all my heart that cooler heads will prevail, common ground will be found across the aisle, and there will be a peaceful transition of power. So I'm an optimist. We've done this throughout the history of our republic. Time and time again. We are the greatest nation on earth, but we're hardly perfect, that's for sure. But we try to perfect ourselves every day. But as it relates to reacting and responding in the aftermath of elections as a country, overwhelmingly, we've done the right thing, and I'm optimistic we'll do the right thing next week.
Yes, I hope so too. Here is so much for positive energy sending to you and your team. Thank you so much for your time again, Governor.
Thanks for having me, Aditi.